Dr. Hanju stared at her computer screen in the quiet observatory. It was past midnight, and she was the only one still working at the Seoul Advanced Space Research Institute. The numbers on her screen made no sense, but she kept checking them again and again. "This can't be right," she whispered to herself. She took off her glasses and rubbed her tired eyes. When she put them back on, the numbers were still the same. For the past 3 months, she had been tracking what she thought was a small dead star. But tonight's readings showed something very different. The object was much smaller than a normal star, but its gravitational pull was incredibly strong. There was only one thing it could be: a micro black hole. Dr. Han quickly reached for her phone and called Dr. Kim Do-yeon, her closest colleague. Despite the late hour, he answered on the third ring. "Do-yeon, you need to come to the observatory right now," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "I found something bad." 40 minutes later, Dr. Kim rushed into the observatory. His gray hair was messy, and he was still wearing his pajamas under his coat. He didn't even bother to sit down before looking at Dr. Han's computer screen. "Show me everything," he said. Dr. Han pulled up all her data from the past 3 months. She pointed to the screen and explained, "Look at the gravitational readings. At first, I thought they were wrong, but I checked everything 3 times. This object is moving through space, and its path." She paused and took a deep breath. "Its path is bringing it closer to our solar system." Dr. Kim leaned in closer to the screen. His face grew pale as he looked at the numbers. "Have you calculated how close it will come to Earth?" Dr. Han nodded slowly. She clicked on another file, showing a map of the solar system with a red line cutting through it. "If these calculations are correct, it will pass dangerously close to Earth's orbit. The gravitational effects could be catastrophic." They spent the next few hours checking and rechecking the data. As the sun began to rise outside their window, they could no longer deny what they were seeing. A black hole, though small, was heading toward Earth's neighborhood in space. "We need to tell Director Park," Dr. Kim said finally. "But we should be absolutely certain before we do. The wrong information could cause panic." Dr. Han agreed. They decided to spend the next week gathering more data and running more tests. They would work in secret, telling no one else about their discovery yet. For the next 7 days, they barely left the observatory. They ordered food delivery and took short naps on the office couch. Other scientists at the institute noticed their strange behavior, but no one questioned them. Both Dr. Han and Dr. Kim were known for getting deeply involved in their work. On the 7th day, they finally had enough data to be sure. The micro black hole was real, and it was definitely moving toward Earth's solar system. Even worse, their new calculations showed it was moving faster than they first thought. Dr. Han looked at their final report with a heavy heart. Tomorrow, they would have to tell Director Park about their discovery. She knew this information would change everything, not just for them, but for the whole world. As she packed up her things to finally go home and get some real sleep, Dr. Han looked out the observatory's large window at the city below. People were going about their normal lives, unaware that somewhere in space, a tiny but incredibly dangerous object was heading their way. "We'll find a way to deal with this," Dr. Kim said, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "Humanity has faced big challenges before." Dr. Han nodded, but she couldn't shake off her worry. This might be the biggest challenge humanity had ever faced, and soon everyone would know about it. Lee Min-ho frowned at his computer screen in the satellite control center. Something wasn't right with the numbers he was seeing. For the 3rd time this week, he had to adjust the orbit of several weather satellites. Usually, he only needed to make such adjustments once every few months. "Hey, can you look at this?" He called to his coworker across the room. But before anyone could answer, his phone buzzed with an urgent message from the Coastal Warning Center. The tides were acting strangely along the Pacific coast. Min-ho sat back in his chair and thought carefully. First, the satellite orbits, now the tides. He had worked in space engineering for 15 years, and he had never seen anything like this. Something was affecting Earth's gravity, but what? He decided to dig deeper. After his shift ended, he stayed late at the office, pulling up data from the past month. The changes were small at first, so small that most people hadn't noticed them. But when he put all the data together, he saw a clear pattern. The gravitational changes were getting stronger. The next morning, Minho went to his supervisor's office to share what he had found. His supervisor listened carefully, then made some calls. By afternoon, Minho was on a video call with scientists from different countries. All of them had noticed similar strange events. The ocean buoys are reporting unusual wave patterns, said a scientist from Australia. Our mining equipment is showing strange readings too, added another from Canada. As they shared their findings, Minho noticed that two scientists seemed quieter than the others. Dr. Han Juwu and Dr. Kim Do-yeon from the Seoul Advanced Space Research Institute barely spoke during the meeting, but they exchanged worried looks every time someone reported a new problem. After the video call ended, Minho couldn't stop thinking about those two scientists. He decided to email Dr. Han directly. To his surprise, she replied within minutes, asking him to come to the institute right away. 2 hours later, Minho stood in Dr. Han's office, looking at her computer screen in shock. The data she showed him explained everything he had observed, and much more. "A black hole," he whispered. "Are you sure?" Dr. Han nodded. "We've been tracking it for weeks now. We were going to announce it soon, but your data helps confirm everything we found." Dr. Kim, who had been quietly standing by the window, spoke up. "The gravitational effects you've noticed are just the beginning. They'll get stronger as the black hole gets closer." Minho sat down heavily in a chair. "How much time do we have?" "About 8 months before the effects become severe," Dr. Han answered. "We're meeting with Director Park tomorrow to discuss our options. We'd like you to join us." That night, Minho couldn't sleep. He stood on his apartment balcony, looking up at the stars. Somewhere out there, an invisible force was moving toward Earth, pulling at their world in ways that would soon be impossible to ignore. His phone buzzed with more messages about satellite adjustments needed. The warning signs were becoming clearer every day. Soon, everyone would notice that something was wrong with the world around them. As he watched the city lights below, Minho thought about all the people going about their normal lives. In just a few days, their world would change forever. The question was, would humanity be ready for what was coming? He thought about Dr. Han and Dr. Kim's calm determination in the face of this crisis. Maybe that's what humanity needed now. People who could stay focused and work on solutions, even when facing the impossible. Tomorrow, they would start planning humanity's response to this threat. But tonight, Minho stood alone with this heavy knowledge, watching the peaceful city below, and hoping they would find a way to save it all. Park Sung-ho, director of the Global Space Coalition, stood at the front of the emergency meeting room. The large screen behind him showed a map of the solar system with a threatening red dot moving toward Earth. The room was filled with world leaders and top scientists, all connected through secure video calls. "What you're about to hear will change everything," Park began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Dr. Han Juwu from the Seoul Advanced Space Research Institute will explain the situation." Dr. Han stepped forward. She had practiced this presentation many times, but facing the worried faces of world leaders made her throat feel dry. She took a sip of water and began. 3 weeks ago, we discovered a micro-black hole moving toward our solar system," she said. "We have confirmed this with scientists from 12 different countries. The evidence is clear. We have 8 months before its gravitational effects become dangerous for Earth." The room erupted in voices. Some leaders demanded more proof. Others wanted to know why they weren't told sooner. A few sat in shocked silence. "Please," Park raised his voice. "Let Dr. Han finish. We have a plan." Dr. Han clicked to the next slide. "We've brought in Dr. Yoon Haejin, one of the world's leading quantum physicists. She has developed a possible solution. Dr. Yoon stood up from her seat. She was younger than most people in the room, but her confidence made everyone listen carefully. "We can build a gravitational deflector array," she explained, showing designs on the screen. "It will use quantum field technology to create a counterforce against the black hole's pull. We've never built anything like this before, but our calculations show it could work." More questions filled the room. How much would it cost? How long would it take to build? What were the risks? "The cost doesn't matter," Park interrupted firmly. "We're talking about saving Earth. We need every country's help. We need every resource we can get." One by one, the world leaders began to agree. They would keep the information secret for now to prevent panic, but all resources would go to the project. As the meeting continued, Dr. Han noticed her phone buzzing. More reports were coming in of strange events worldwide. Earthquakes in unusual places, changes in animal migration patterns. The black hole's influence was growing stronger. After 4 hours of intense discussion, the leaders reached an agreement. They would call it Project Horizon, humanity's greatest effort to save itself. As people began to leave the meeting room, Dr. Yoon approached Dr. Han. "We'll need to work fast," she said. "The designs are ready, but building this in space won't be easy." "Can we really do this?" Dr. Han asked quietly. "We have to," Dr. Yoon replied. "There's no other choice." Later that night, Park stood in his office, looking out at the city lights. His assistant brought in the latest reports from around the world. Scientists everywhere were being quietly contacted. Space agencies were preparing their resources. The largest secret operation in human history was beginning. His phone rang. It was the president of the World Bank. "The funds are ready," the president said. "Whatever you need." Park thanked him and hung up. On his desk, Dr. Yoon's designs glowed on his tablet screen. The array looked like nothing humans had ever built before. But it was their only hope. Tomorrow, they would begin. Every space center, every laboratory, every factory that could help would start working on different parts of the array. They had 8 months to build something that should take years. Park looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, invisible to the naked eye, death was approaching. But humans weren't going to just wait for it. They would fight back with everything they had. Kang Ji-hun floated in space, watching as another massive piece of the deflector array arrived from Earth. Through his helmet, he could see the huge construction robots moving the piece into position. The array was starting to take shape, spreading out like a giant metal flower in space. "Section 7 is ready for connection." His radio crackled with a message from the control station. "How are the power readings looking?" Ji-hun checked the tablet attached to his spacesuit. "Power levels are stable. Starting the connection process now." As chief engineer of the space construction project, Ji-hun had to make sure every piece fit perfectly. One small mistake could ruin everything. They had already been working for 3 months, and they were only halfway done. Down on Earth, in the project control room, Dr. Yoon Haejin watched the construction through multiple screens. She had designed the array, but seeing it being built was different from drawing it on paper. Each piece had to be made exactly right, or her calculations wouldn't work. "Dr. Yoon," a voice called from behind her. "The latest gravity readings are here." She turned to see Lee Min-ho holding a tablet. His face looked worried. The black hole's effects were getting stronger every day. More people were noticing that something was wrong. The news was full of stories about strange weather and unusual tides. "How bad is it?" she asked. "Worse than we expected," Min-ho replied. "The black hole is moving faster now. We might only have 6 months left, not 8. Dr. Yoon's heart sank. She pressed a button on her communications panel. "Jun, we need to speed things up. Can your team work any faster?" Up in space, Ji-hun looked at the partly finished array. His team was already working as fast as they could. They worked in shifts around the clock, taking breaks only when absolutely necessary. The space station that served as their base was crowded with engineers and technicians from every space agency on Earth. "We'll try," he answered, "but we can't rush the connections. One wrong move and—" Suddenly, all his instruments started beeping. A strong gravitational wave had just passed through the construction site. Several pieces of equipment started floating away from their positions. "Everyone hold on," Jian shouted into his radio. He grabbed onto a support beam as the wave passed. When it was over, he quickly checked all the systems. "Status report." Dr. Yoon's voice came through his radio, sounding worried. "We're okay," Jian replied. "But we lost some tools, and 3 connection points need to be redone." This was their biggest challenge. As they built the array, the black hole's gravity kept getting stronger. It was like trying to build a house while the ground kept shaking. Back in the control room, Dr. Yoon made a difficult decision. "We need to change the design," she said to Minho. "Make it simpler. We won't have time to build the whole thing as planned." "Will it still work if it's not complete?" Minho asked. "It has to," she answered. "We'll adjust the quantum field calculations. A smaller array might still be enough to save Earth." That night, Jian stayed out in space longer than usual, working on the connections. Through his helmet, he could see Earth below, beautiful and blue. Sometimes he forgot what they were fighting for, but looking at Earth reminded him. Everything and everyone he had ever known was on that planet. "We're not giving up," he said quietly to himself. "No matter what it takes." Choi Yoon-ho walked through the crowded community center, where worried people gathered to discuss the strange events happening around the world. As a social worker with 15 years of experience, she had never seen people so frightened. The government still hadn't announced the real reason for the unusual weather and tides, but rumors were spreading quickly. Ms. Choi, an elderly woman, called out, "The waves nearly reached my house yesterday. They've never come that far before. What's really happening?" Yoon-ho sat down next to the woman. She knew the truth about the black hole. She was part of the crisis management team. But she also knew that panic would only make things worse. "We're working on solutions," she said carefully. "The most important thing right now is to stay together as a community and help each other." In her office later that day, Yoon-ho reviewed her new community support plan. She had created a system where neighborhoods could work together, sharing resources and helping those in need. Other cities were starting to copy her ideas. Her phone rang. It was Director Park from the Global Space Coalition. "Your community support system is working well," he said. "We want to implement it worldwide. Can you train other social workers?" "Of course," Yoon-ho replied. "But people are getting more scared. We need to tell them something." Park was quiet for a moment. "You're right. We're planning to make an announcement next week. Can your support systems handle the response?" "They'll have to," she said. "People are stronger when they work together." That evening, Yoon-ho visited different community centers across the city. In each one, she saw her system at work. People were organizing food banks, creating emergency plans, and setting up support groups. Despite their fear, they were coming together. In one center, she found a group of children drawing pictures. "What are you drawing?" she asked a small boy. "The sky," he said. "Mom says it looks different now. But I'm not scared because we're all helping each other." Yoon-ho smiled, but her heart felt heavy. Soon, everyone would know about the black hole. She needed to make sure her support systems were ready. The next day, she met with other social workers through video calls. She taught them how to set up community support networks, how to prevent panic, and how to help people stay strong together. "Remember," she told them, "in times of crisis, people need 3 things: clear information, practical help, and hope. We can give them all 3. As she worked, reports kept coming in about the black hole's effects. More coastal areas were flooding. Earthquakes were becoming more common. The night sky looked slightly different now. But Yoon-ho also saw something amazing happening. In every city where her support system was working, people were becoming stronger together. Instead of fighting each other, they were helping their neighbors. Communities were becoming closer. That night, as she walked home, Yuna looked up at the strange sky. The world was facing its biggest crisis ever. But maybe it was also humanity's chance to show its best side. Her phone buzzed with a message from Director Park. Announcement scheduled for tomorrow. Be ready. Yuna took a deep breath. Tomorrow would be challenging, but her communities were prepared. Whatever happened with the black hole, people would face it together. Song Minjae stood in the main control room of Project Horizon, staring at the large countdown clock on the wall. 2 months remained until the black hole would reach its critical point. The room buzzed with activity as engineers and scientists worked at their stations, monitoring the partially complete deflector array in space. Project Director, a voice called out. Dr. Han needs to see you immediately. Minjae hurried to the science station, where Dr. Han Jiwoo was examining new data. Her face was pale, and her hand shook slightly as she pointed to her screen. The black hole's acceleration has increased again, she said quietly, so others wouldn't hear. We don't have 2 months. We have 6 weeks at most. Minjae felt his stomach tighten. He looked up at the massive screen showing the space construction. The deflector array was only 70% complete. They needed at least 3 more weeks to finish the essential systems according to the original plan. Get Dr. Yoon and Engineer Kang on video call now, he ordered. We need to make some hard decisions. 10 minutes later, Dr. Yoon Haijin's face appeared on the screen from her laboratory, while Kang Ji-hun joined from the space station. Both looked tired after weeks of non-stop work. We need to cut more corners, Minjae said firmly. What parts of the array can we leave unfinished? We've already simplified the design twice. Dr. Yoon protested. If we cut more, I can't guarantee it will work. If we don't cut more, we won't finish in time at all. Kang replied from space. My team is working as fast as they can, but we're losing more time dealing with the gravity waves. Minjae looked at the latest reports on his tablet. The black hole's effects were now visible to everyone on Earth. The oceans were behaving strangely, and the moon's orbit had shifted noticeably. The public announcement last month had caused less panic than expected, thanks to Choi Yum-ha's community support systems, but fear was still growing. Show me the minimum we need to make this work, he said to Dr. Yoon. For the next hour, they went through the designs, marking what was absolutely necessary and what they could skip. Each decision felt like gambling with Earth's future, but they had no choice. If we focus all our resources on these core sections, Kang said, highlighting parts of the array on their shared screen, we might finish just in time. The power output will be lower than we planned, Dr. Yoon warned. We'll only get one chance to activate it. Minjae nodded slowly. One chance is better than no chance. Make it happen. Over the next few days, Minjae watched as their new plan went into action. Construction robots were moved to focus only on the core sections. Space crews worked in longer shifts, despite the increasing risk from gravity waves. On Earth, factories rushed to complete the final components. Late one night, as he reviewed the latest progress reports, Dr. Han came to his office. We did the right thing, she said, seeing the worry on his face. Sometimes the bravest decision is to admit we can't do everything perfectly. Minjae walked to his window and looked up at the night sky. The stars seemed to be in slightly different positions now, affected by the approaching black hole's gravity. When I took this job, he said quietly, I never imagined I'd be making decisions that could affect whether Earth lives or dies. None of us did, Dr. Han replied. But we're not giving up. We're just changing our approach. Sometimes, that's what bravery looks like. The next morning, Minjae called a meeting with all project leaders. They had a new timeline and a simplified plan. It wasn't perfect, but it was their best hope. Now they just had to make it work. Bog Jinyoung's fingers moved quickly over his control panel in the space station. As the systems specialist in charge of activating the deflector array, he had practiced this sequence thousands of times. But now, with Earth's future depending on it, every button press felt different. All stations, report status. His voice was steady despite his racing heart. One by one, the responses came in from different parts of the array. The simplified design they had built over the past weeks looked nothing like their original plans, but it was their only hope. Through the station's window, Earth looked strange. The black hole's gravity had pulled the planet slightly off its normal orbit. The moon appeared larger than usual, and the oceans below showed unusual patterns of light and dark where the tides had changed. Final systems check complete, Jinyang announced. Ready to begin power-up sequence. In the main control room on Earth, Dr. Yoon Haijin watched all the readings carefully. They would only get one chance at this. The black hole was now close enough that its gravitational pull was affecting everything from ocean tides to the very ground beneath their feet. Start the sequence, Dr. Yoon ordered. All backup power systems standing by. Jinyang began the activation process. The array's quantum field generator started humming to life. Blue energy began flowing through the massive structure, visible even from Earth as a soft glow in the night sky. Power at 20%, he reported. All systems responding normally. Suddenly, warning lights flashed across his panel. A strong gravitational wave from the black hole hit the array, stronger than any they had seen before. The entire space station shook. Status report. Dr. Yoon's voice was urgent in his headset. Section 3 power couplings are failing. Jinyang replied, his fingers flying over the controls. Redirecting power through backup systems. On Earth, people could now see the black hole's effects without any instruments. The sky had taken on a strange, twisted appearance, as light itself was bent by the immense gravitational force. Night and day patterns had become irregular. Power at 50%, Jinyang continued. Quantum field generators holding steady. In the control room, Dr. Han Jiwoo watched the readings from the black hole. Its pull was getting stronger every minute. If they didn't activate the array soon, Earth's orbit would be permanently damaged. 70% power, Jinyang's voice came through. Warning. Temperature in main generators exceeding safety limits. Keep going, Dr. Yoon ordered. The system can handle it. The entire array was now glowing brightly, visible from everywhere on Earth's night side. People stopped what they were doing to look up at the strange blue light in the sky, hoping it meant salvation. 90%, Jinyang reported. His hands were shaking, but his voice remained professional. Final power threshold approaching. Everyone in the control room held their breath. This was the moment all their work had led to. If the array failed now, there would be no second chance. 100% power achieved, Jinyang announced. Quantum field stable, ready to activate on your command. Dr. Yoon looked at Dr. Han, who nodded slowly. This was humanity's last hope. Activate the array, Dr. Yoon commanded. May the calculations be right. Jinyang pressed the final sequence of buttons. The array's glow intensified, and a massive pulse of quantum energy burst forth, reaching out toward the approaching black hole. Now they would see if their desperate plan would save Earth, or if they had failed. 1 year after the activation of the deflector array, Dr. Han Jiwoo stood at a podium in front of the new Global Space Research Center. The building's design included a piece of the array that had fallen back to Earth, now displayed as a monument to humanity's greatest achievement. The black hole changed us forever, she began her speech, looking at the crowd gathered before her. Not just by changing Earth's orbit slightly, but by showing us what we can do when we work together. She remembered that day 1 year ago, when they activated the array. The quantum field had worked better than they had hoped, pushing against the black hole's gravity. Though they couldn't stop the black hole completely, they had changed its path just enough to save Earth. In the front row, she could see the faces of those who had made it possible. Dr. Yoon Haijin, whose quantum field theories had given them hope. Kang Ji-hun, who had led the construction in space. Bai Jinyang, whose steady hands had activated the array. Song Min-jae, who had made the tough decisions when time ran short. Near them sat Choi Yoon-ha, whose community support systems had kept society stable during the crisis. Her methods were now being used worldwide to help people face other challenges. Lee Minho, whose early warning had given them precious extra time to prepare, now led a new global satellite monitoring system. The black hole's passage left changes in our world, Dr. Han continued. Our years are now slightly longer. Our seasons have shifted a little. The moon's orbit is different, but we survived, and we learned important lessons. She pointed to the new building behind her. Inside, scientists from every country worked together, sharing knowledge and resources in ways they never had before. The old barriers between nations had fallen during the crisis and never returned. The array's success had given humanity new technologies. Dr. Yoon's quantum field theories had led to breakthroughs in energy production. The space construction techniques developed by Kang's team were being used to build new stations and research facilities in orbit. But our greatest achievement wasn't technical, Dr. Han said. It was learning that we could face any challenge if we worked together. That knowledge changed us more than the black hole ever could. After her speech, Dr. Han walked through the research center's halls. Young scientists from different countries worked side by side, studying space and preparing for future challenges. The world was different now. People looked at the stars with new understanding and new purpose. That evening, she met with her old team for dinner. Dr. Kim Do-yeon, who had shared her first terrifying discovery, raised his glass in a toast. To the future, he said simply. Everyone joined in. They had all changed during the crisis. They were stronger now, wiser, more united. The black hole had nearly destroyed Earth, but instead, it had made humanity better. Later that night, Dr. Han stood on her balcony, looking at the slightly changed night sky. The moon looked different now, and some stars had shifted position. But Earth was safe, and humans had proven they could face even the greatest dangers space could send their way. Her phone buzzed with a message from the Space Center. A new group of students wanted to learn about the black hole crisis. They wanted to understand how humanity had faced its greatest challenge and won. Dr. Han smiled. That was the real legacy of their work, not just saving Earth, but showing future generations what was possible when humans worked together. The black hole had tried to destroy them, but instead, it had helped humanity reach for the stars.